The story of Caonabo, a Taino chief, and the Battle of Vega Real in Hispaniola is one of resistance, leadership, and tragedy in the early years of Spanish colonization in the Americas. This historical moment not only highlights the clash of cultures, but also illuminates the courage of indigenous leaders like Caonabo, who stood against overwhelming odds to protect their lands and people. Caonabo was one of the most significant Taino leaders during the late 15th century, but he was no noble savage. His name, believed to mean noble lord or the brave one, reflects his commanding presence and role as a protector of his people. He ruled the Maguana kingdom, located in the central region of Hispaniola, in the modern-day Dominican Republic. Caonabo's life and the Battle of Vega Real illustrate the resilience and courage of the Taino people in the face of colonial aggression. Though ultimately unsuccessful in halting the Spanish conquest, Caonabo's resistance remains a powerful symbol of defiance and the enduring struggle for freedom. His story is a reminder of the indomitable spirit of those who stood against colonization. Unlike many other caciques, Caonabo is thought to have had origins outside of Hispaniola, possibly from the warlike Carib people of the Lesser Antilles. This background may have contributed to his reputation as a fierce warrior and strategist. He was married to Ana Caona, a revered Taino poetess and leader from the Zaragua kingdom. Their union symbolized an alliance between two powerful Taino territories. Caonabo's leadership was marked by his unyielding resistance to Spanish encroachment. Unlike other Taino caciques who initially sought peaceful relations with the Spanish, Caonabo recognized the existential threat they posed. He became a central figure in organizing resistance, uniting various Taino groups to oppose the invaders. His strategic mind and charismatic leadership made him both a respected and feared figure among his people and the Spanish alike. In 1492, Christopher Columbus made his first voyage to the Americas, landing on the island of Hispaniola, modern-day Dominican Republic and Haiti. During this voyage, one of Columbus's ships, the Santa Maria, was wrecked off the northern coast of the island. Using the salvaged wood, Columbus and his crew constructed a small fort called La Navidad. He left 39 men at the fort to establish a foothold while he returned to Spain to report his discoveries. The Spaniards left behind at La Navidad quickly became a source of tension with natives. They demanded gold, enslaved local Taino people, and committed acts of violence. Their behavior enraged the local caciques, particularly Caonabo, who ruled the central kingdom of Maguana. Unlike other Taino leaders who initially sought peaceful relations with the Spanish, Caonabo recognized them as a dire threat to his people and sovereignty. Caonabo's most notable act of defiance was the destruction of La Navidad, the first Spanish settlement in the Americas, which was built from the wreck of the Santa Maria. This bold move established him as a symbol of indigenous resistance and set the stage for further confrontations, including the pivotal Battle of Vega Real. This was the first brutal hand-to-hand battle between Europeans and Native Americans, which would go on for the next 500 years. The Carib, known for their seafaring prowess and martial culture, were a formidable force in the Caribbean during the 15th and 16th centuries. Unlike the relatively peaceful Taino, the Caribs had a reputation for being fierce warriors, frequently engaging in raids on neighboring islands and Spanish ships. Their dugout canoes, capable of carrying dozens of warriors, allowed them to dominate the waterways of the Lesser Antilles and beyond. The Caribs' resistance to Spanish colonization was tenacious. They targeted Spanish settlements and vessels, disrupting supply lines and delaying the establishment of colonial control in many areas. Their reputation as fierce fighters and their ability to coordinate attacks made them a constant threat to the Spanish and other European powers.
That group of people going back to Europe and saying, well, what'd you find? They said, we found the children of God. And I've heard the term Hente Indios. I've heard that term, and that Indios is what stuck.
The Caribs' warrior culture, which emphasized physical strength, strategic raids, and territorial defense, paralleled Caonabo's own martial leadership in his stand against the Spanish. While Columbus was in Spain, Caonabo rallied his warriors and launched a decisive attack on La Navidad. The fort was destroyed, and 39 Spanish settlers were killed. This act of resistance marked one of the earliest organized uprisings against European colonization in the Americas. By the time Columbus returned to Hispaniola in late 1493 with a larger fleet, he found La Navidad in ruins. Determined to re-establish Spanish control, Columbus built a new settlement called La Isabela on the northern coast. He also began exploring the island and demanding tribute from the Taino. These actions heightened tensions between the Spaniards and the indigenous peoples. Caonabo, emboldened by his earlier success, began organizing further resistance. His defiance set the stage for the confrontation at Vega Real. Caonabo united various Taino chiefdoms to form a coalition against the Spanish. This alliance represented a significant effort to resist colonization, as many caciques set aside local rivalries to confront the common enemy. Estimates suggest Caonabo gathered thousands of warriors for this purpose. The Spanish conquistadors, fresh from the centuries-long Reconquista of the Iberian Peninsula, brought with them a deeply ingrained militaristic culture. The Reconquista, a campaign to reclaim Spain from foreign rule, shaped the Spanish into a society that celebrated warfare, religious zeal, and conquest. By the late 15th century, Spain's military tradition was among the most advanced in Europe, combining innovative tactics with superior weaponry. In the Americas, the Spanish employed their martial prowess to devastating effect. Armed with steel swords, firearms, and cannons, and supported by cavalry, the Spanish overwhelmed indigenous forces that relied on traditional weapons and tactics. The Spanish justified their aggression as a divine mission to spread Christianity and civilize the indigenous peoples, further fueling their relentless expansion. This warlike ethos often led to brutal campaigns of conquest, as seen in the annihilation of the Taino resistance on Hispaniola and the later conquests of the Aztec and Inca empires. The Spanish soldiers and settlers carried the mentality of the Reconquista into the New World, treating every engagement as a holy war that demanded both martial and spiritual victory. The Spanish forces, led by Bartolomé Colón, Christopher's brother, and the young officer Alonso de Ojeda, numbered only a few dozen men. However, they were equipped with steel weapons, crossbows, cannons, and horses, all of which were unknown to the Taino. The Spanish relied on these technological advantages to compensate for their vastly smaller numbers. The battle took place in the fertile Vega Real Valley, near present-day Santiago in the Dominican Republic. The Taino warriors launched an ambush, attempting to use their numerical superiority to overwhelm the Spanish, but the Spaniards' horses and firearms terrified the Taino, who had never seen such weapons. The Spanish cavalry, in particular, proved devastating, as the Taino were unprepared for the speed and power of mounted soldiers. The dawn broke over the Vega Real, its golden light glinting off the dewy grass. Caonabo stood on a low hill, surveying the vast expanse before him. His warriors gathered in disciplined ranks, their faces painted with the red and black symbols of war. The air buzzed with tension, heavy with the anticipation of what was to come. Caonabo was no ordinary man. His broad shoulders and commanding presence set him apart from the others. His bronze-toned skin shimmered with ceremonial oils, and his long dark hair was tied back with a leather thong. Around his neck he wore a modest necklace of shells and gold, symbols of his authority. His chest was adorned with intricate body paint, each line and swirl a prayer to the gods for victory. In his hand he carried a staff carved from mahogany, its tip crowned with a small golden idol. Beside him stood his wife, Anacaona, her eyes fierce with determination. "They will not break us," she whispered, her voice steady despite the turmoil around them. "We will fight as our ancestors did." Caonabo nodded. "Today we show them that this land is ours, and we will not let these filthy pale-skinned savages take it from us." From the far end of the valley, a column of Spanish soldiers advanced. Their steel breastplates gleamed in the sunlight, and the banners of Castile fluttered above them. The sight of their horses unnerved many of the Taino warriors, but Caonabo raised his staff, shouting words of encouragement. "Do not fear their beasts," he roared. The warriors responded with a thunderous cry, their voices echoing across the valley. The Taino began their charge, a tidal wave of humanity armed with spears, bows, and clubs. The clash was ferocious. The Taino fought with the desperation of those defending their homeland, but the Spanish weaponry gave them an insurmountable advantage. Cannons roared, sending plumes of smoke and deadly shrapnel into the Taino ranks. The cavalry charged, their hooves pounding the earth like a storm, scattering warriors in their path. Caonabo fought at the front lines, his staff swinging with deadly precision. He struck down a Spanish soldier, then another, his movements swift and calculated. But for every Spaniard who fell, a dozen Taino warriors were lost. The battle was slipping away. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, Caonabo called for a retreat. His warriors fled into the dense forests, their spirits shattered but their resolve unbroken. Caonabo himself stayed behind, determined to cover their escape. Days later, Alonso de Ojeda found him. The Spaniard arrived under a flag of truce, bearing gifts of gold. "Great cacique," he said, bowing low, "let us talk of peace." Caonabo regarded him with suspicion but agreed to meet. When Ojeda produced golden manacles, claiming they were a symbol of respect, Caonabo's curiosity overcame his caution. He allowed Ojeda to place them on his wrists, not realizing he had been betrayed until it was too late. Bound and humiliated, Caonabo was marched to the coast and placed aboard a Spanish ship bound for Spain. He spent his final days in chains, staring out at the endless sea. His thoughts turned to his wife Anacona and the people he had left behind. "I have failed them," he whispered to himself, but deep within, he knew his spirit would endure. His name would live on, a beacon of resistance for generations to come. Today, Caonabo is remembered as a symbol of resistance and bravery, embodying the spirit of defiance against colonial oppression.